Hey guys, welcome to another movie review. Today I'm talking about the latest installment in the Quiet Place franchise. This film is actually a spin-off and a prequel to that franchise. It's called A Quiet Place Day One. And we do focus on the very first day of the invasion of these aliens, kind of what was going on in New York City while John Krasinski's family from those first two films was kind of taking cover at this point. Kind of we see what was going on over at New York City and how, a major place within the U.S. handled this invasion. And so that's kind of what this film is. And so, I guess for an overall synopsis for this film, we follow a character played by Lupita Nyong'o. Without going into too much detail on her, because I don't want to spoil anything, this is a non-spoiler review. Basically, she is going through a certain kind of illness, and the doctors don't think she has a lot of time to live, and so she's basically trying to use the most of the time that she has left here on Earth. And basically, go to places, do things, explore some favorite foods of hers before her time is over with. And so basically, at the very early stages of the film, we follow her around. We try to see kind of some things she's wants to do, wants to see within New York. I think there's something in Harlem at one point she mentions that she wants to see. Get that one last slice of pizza, so that's her favorite food, and just make sure everything that that was kind of on her bucket list is explored. But while all this is going on, obviously the invasion happens from these creatures in the first two films, and that definitely throws everything into ruckus for her and for everybody else. She also meets a character played by Joseph Quinn in this movie, who is a law student, and he doesn't really have family in the area. He's just kind of there for education purposes, and so he really doesn't have anybody while the invasion's taking place. And so the two of them kind of bond and survive the situation together, and they help each other out. There's certain things that Lupita Nyong'o's character needs as far as medications are concerned, so Joseph Quinn has to help her out with that throughout the movie. But overall, in this movie, you guys, we do follow the first day of the invasion, kind of the first couple days, I would say, as well. What was going on in New York City? How did the people in the area survive it? Why did certain people not survive it? What kind of discoveries were made early on? And what kind of things still needed to be discovered at this point for people to survive such a terrible invasion. But overall, guys, I really enjoyed this film quite a bit. I've been a huge fan of the Quiet Place franchise so far. They really have not turned in a bad film yet. This is the first installment of the franchise that is not directed by John Krasinski, so I was kind of curious to see how it was going to continue forward. I do know John Krasinski is confirmed for Quiet Place Part 3, which will be the continuation of that family that we saw from the first two films. But this is the first time where it's a Quiet Place film that's not around that family. It's not directed by John Krasinski. So I was kind of curious to see, they had a new director obviously involved for this one. I was curious to see how the franchise was going to move forward, if the prequel was going to benefit it, and kind of see what kind of things we were going to see throughout this movie that were going to help this film or potentially hurt it as well. For my positives and negatives for this film, though, you guys, I do like how the film does play out day one. It does show us, how nobody really knew what the aliens were, and how, we were very, very noisy when they first came here. So obviously the very first day was very tragic for a lot of people. So I do like how the film does depict that. The very first day was very rough. Nobody knew any weaknesses of the aliens. Everybody was trying to take cover and try to figure out, maybe one person figured out that they were sound sensitive, and the other person figured out that they weren't very good about seeing, and all this other stuff. It was interesting to see how certain people made certain discoveries the way that they did, and there was still some discoveries that were yet to be made for the aliens. I also liked the overall New York setting. I do like how they really truly do make it as big as they possibly can. They do try to, explore different kind of buildings and different kind of subway stations and different things that you would see in New York City, and how these creatures kind of inhabited that land, and how there were survivors that were trying to make their way through the city, make their ways to, safer points for this invasion. So I do like how the film does make use of the New York setting in the best possible way that it can. I also thought Lupita Nyong'o and Joseph Quinn's characters are very strong here. There's something I'm going to bring up in my negatives regarding Lupita Nyong'o, but as far as her character goes, as far as us caring about her and kind of her journey and her path and making sure that her bucket list kind of gets fulfilled while this apocalypse is going on. And then with Joseph Quinn's character, obviously he doesn't have any family or friends to kind of resort to during this apocalypse, so we have to figure out with him how he's going to kind of move forward from this and live the rest of his life the best he possibly can during this apocalypse. So very strong characters here, and I like how the film really gave us reasons to care about them over the course of this film. There's also a cat character named Frodo in this. I do believe that's supposed to be a reference to Lord of the Rings, and the cat's very cute here. There's a lot of sequences where Lupita Nyong'o has to feed it or find water for the cat and stuff, and so the cat's very cute here. Nothing super awful happens to it, so for those who are worried about that in this movie, you don't have to worry about that. Very cute character, and definitely a fun addition to this film, and a very fun, charming little character to add to the mix of the characters in this film. I also do kind of like, and maybe the second film kind of sort of nodded to this, but I think this film kind of confirms it. I do like kind of additional ground rule is formed for the alien creatures in this. There's an alien, and it really doesn't spoil anything. It's just kind of another weakness that's explored that's not really a plot point, but it's just kind of us as the audience who can be like, oh, I guess now we know that about the aliens now. But they can't be underwater for super long. I thought that was kind of interesting. I do know there were sequences in earlier films where they do go underwater briefly to kind of go after something that they heard noise-wise. But it is interesting that this film does confirm that, unlike a person, the aliens really can't hold their breath very long underwater. So I thought that was very interesting, and a nice little new ground rule that the franchise has now created for itself. So hopefully they can keep that consistent in later films. But I do like how they did try to at least attempt to form a new ground rule with these aliens. And as far as I know, too, I don't think we've ever been introduced to like smaller versions of the aliens or really big versions of these aliens. So I don't know if that was something that was added into this film to kind of further the lore of this movie and further the lore of the franchise. So I thought that aspect was also very, very effective in this film, too. There's also nods to earlier discoveries from the first two films. So for those who remember, John Krasinski and his son having a discussion near a waterfall, and obviously that was a safe place to do that. Characters in this film make similar discoveries of, being next to a water fountain or finding out that the rain and the thunderstorms give you an opportunity to basically do things that you wouldn't be able to do in a really quiet, dry environment. So I like how the film does explore those earlier discoveries and how us as an audience from those earlier films know that that's a safe thing for the characters to basically pursue if they have a conversation with somebody or if they want to do something that might make some noise. So I do like how those earlier discoveries were explored in this film, and we see characters from a different part of the world also make those discoveries about this invasion as well. I also liked how this film really made sure that every sound counted in this film, whether it's a briefcase that moved or something on the ground that moved or a glass bottle that got tipped over. This film makes sure that every sound does count in this film, whether it's an alien doing an attack or characters trying to having to take cover during that sound is made. I do like how, and I know the first two films did a great job with this as well, but I do like how every sound does count in this film. I really like to, if you're with a good audience and they're nice and quiet throughout this film, something as simple as somebody eating their popcorn will definitely add tension to the room as far as those additional sounds are concerned. So this film does a great job with the use of sound, and I know that's something that this franchise is very good with thus far. So this film in particular, I thought did a great job with its sound for sure. But for my negatives of this movie, and this, I guess this kind of goes back to what I brought up earlier about Lupita Nyong'o. I thought the opening of this film was very weak and misleading. I don't like how the opening makes her kind of look like a kind of a bad person. There's also a character played by Alex Wolff that I'm also going to bring up here in a minute too, that kind of makes him look like a bad person too. And so it was just a very unusual way to open a film for me because it's one of those things where I think you could do everything you need to do to establish this character before this invasion happens, whether it's letting us know about her illness, letting us know about her bucket list, letting us know that Alex Wolff is one of the nurses that's taking care of her. And the film does it in a very kind of an off-putting way, I would say. And it's just one of those things where you kind of want the invasion to happen just because the way it's setting itself up isn't very interesting. So I thought that aspect of the story was very weak. Nothing against Lupita Nyong'o or Alex Wolff. This obviously wasn't their fault. It was just the way that their characters are written in those earlier scenes. It just would have been nice to have seen a much more pleasant way to get the information that we need to know about them around the time that we need to know, rather than just doing these off-putting, making them look darker than they really are throughout the rest of the film. Because literally, once the invasion happens, they're much more likable. You have much more reasons to care about them and stuff like that. So I just thought the way this film opened wasn't particularly strong, unfortunately. I also thought the use of lighting wasn't very good in this movie. There's just a lot of scenes where Lupita Nyong'o and Joseph Quinn are trying to, take cover in these dark rooms, and you really just don't see a lot. It's just one of those things where you'll see like maybe a part of a face, or there'll be like some kind of light source in the background that will kind of give you you'll see like the couch in the room or something like that. But I didn't like how when those scenes are taking place, or like there's even like a subway scene in this film too, where you really don't get to see a lot of what's going on. I just think it's a very, very cheap way to kind of lower production costs and make sure we don't see, the flaws in the set and stuff like that. So, and I get that they're trying to show that, they're in these dark areas and they're trying to make sure the lights aren't on and stuff like that. But for me personally, I thought the use of lighting could have been better in this film, specifically when they're in dark areas in this film too. And bringing up Alex Wolff's character again, I did not like the way his character was written here. I didn't like how brief his character role was. I didn't like the way he was written. I didn't like how they tried to make him this unlikable person. So I thought that aspect was very, very not so great either. So I thought that aspect of the story could have been better. And I just thought they could have just written a better role for him overall, personally. And there's also this dumb part too where they try to inform the citizens of New York not to make any noise through these like megaphones on these helicopters. And of course the aliens are going to attack. You're making noise. And there's just one of those things where if you really want to make your point that you don't want people to make noise, follow a good example and don't make noise yourself. So I thought that aspect was very, very dumb and weak as well. So unfortunately it happens more than once in this film. And when it does happen, it's just not very good. I also thought Lupita Nyong'o's character closure could have been better. I thought just the overall way to close her character out in this film could have been improved. Because just the way they chose to end her character arc in this film, I thought just wasn't as complete as it should have been. And then I do overall think this film is missing John Krasinski's special touch. So I am happy that Quiet Place Part 3 is going to be directed by him. Because I do feel like this is definitely his franchise, and he belongs in the director's chair for this franchise as well. So, Quiet Place Day 1, I am going to give it an 8.5 out of 10. I think it's a very well-made film. It's another great addition to this franchise. I highly recommend it, but do go in knowing it's not quite as good as those first two films, and I think you'll have a good time with it. I think keeping your expectations in the right place is a good thing to do for this film. 8.5 out of 10 for me. I highly recommend Quiet Place Day 1.